Dr. Bach, last time we looked at the Tudor monarchs, and this time we are going to explore its political and religious dimension. This is the period of Reformation. People say that there is a religious strife all over Europe. Why is this so significant? How do we account for it?
Well, you're quite right. The Reformation is the most important event in the 16th century, and it certainly changes all of Europe. Yes. It begins in 1517 when Martin Luther rejects the Pope and the Catholic Church, yes. And not only rejects them, but says that they're the work of the devil. And like all great changes in history, the Reformation comes out of an idea, and the idea that Luther has is that you don't get into heaven by paying monks to say prayers for you or do good works on your behalf. You don't even get into heaven by doing good things yourself. The only way you can achieve salvation is through having faith in God. And how do you get that? And the answer is God gives it to you. Okay. And so this very important idea has enormous political and social consequences, yes. Because what's the purpose of monasteries if monks saying prayers don't get you into heaven? And there's a huge amount of wealth which is bound up with monasteries, and so why people begin to ask, is all this wealth lying useless? Yes. Why shouldn't it be used for other better national projects? Yes. That kind of question begins to be asked. I think that the Reformation is important too because it led to debate, very, very, very strong, vicious debate. After all, it was about whether people would be saved, whether their souls would be going to heaven or whether they will go to hell. Yeah. And that matters to people. And that explains why the debate is so strong. And I often think that if you want to say what's the difference between Western culture and Chinese or Asian culture today, the biggest difference is that Western culture is a culture of debate, whereas Chinese culture is fundamentally a culture of respect.
That's a very interesting analogy.
If you want to say where does that come from, I would say originally this goes back to the Reformation, and that
goes back there.
It goes right back to there in the West, and in particular in England, and therefore in English-speaking culture. So that's why I think it's important, and it certainly affects England, because when King Henry VIII breaks England away from Rome, he is asserting that England is a sovereign nation state. The word he uses is imperium in the Act in Restraint of Appeals in 1533, and the word imperium is literally translated empire, but what it means is sovereign nation state. No other power, no outside power can intervene legally in the internal affairs of Great Britain. And in the Middle Ages, that had not been the case. The Pope had significant legal and financial powers in England, not just theoretically, but actually in practice. Yes. Henry VIII makes England a nation state, and that is a decisive moment in English history. Yes. What's more, it's decisive because it's an act of state. It's an act which comes from above. In the Victorian period, and until quite recently, historians used to regard the Reformation as something which was, as it were, coming for years, that there was a kind of popular movement behind it. But more recently, that view has been questioned, particularly by the Catholic historian Scarisbrick, who argues that England, at a popular level, was quite contented as a Catholic country. There were indeed areas of Protestantism, particularly in London. There was a little Protestant group at Cambridge, but that there was no great popular movement to get rid of the Catholic Church. So this is an act of state imposed from above by a very powerful, extremely ruthless king. It did actually provoke one major rebellion called the Pilgrimage of Grace in the middle of the 1530s.
Yes.
And that rebellion would have succeeded if its leaders hadn't trusted the king and disarmed, only to find themselves all arrested and executed within a matter of months. Henry was a very, very ruthless monarch, and the Reformation is an act of state imposed from above. But it comes to define England because Protestantism, which it opens the way to, is closely associated in the English mind with national identity and liberty.
Oh, okay, that's very interesting. So, in this period, religion is a highly political issue.
Absolutely. I mean, today, that is definitely not the case in the 16th and to some extent the 17th century. Religion and politics are closely connected. I think for various reasons. One is that toleration can be regarded as an evil thing if what is being tolerated is evil. Take an analogy. Today, we would not wish to tolerate someone who was pushing drugs, who, as it were, believed in hard drugs and was trying to push and persuade other people to have them. We wouldn't say, well, that's your right, you're free to do that, because you would say that, no, look, this is harmful, not only to you, but more importantly, it's harmful to society.
Yes.
And therefore it should definitely, to tolerate it would be an evil.
Yes.
Well, similarly, in the 16th century, to tolerate ideas which would infect people and their religious belief and so affect their prospects of salvation, which is not just for this life, it's forever and ever, that's unacceptable. And so religious toleration is regarded as an evil in the early stages of the Reformation. We can see the beginnings of the idea of religious toleration say in Queen Elizabeth I, she says in the 1560s in one point, she says, "I will not make windows into men's souls." And what she means by that is that as long as your loyalty to the state is absolutely cast iron, absolutely solid, then I'm not going to inquire what your religious beliefs are. Okay. This points the way forward to religious toleration. But Elizabeth found it very, very difficult to follow through on that because she was facing the threat of invasion from the greatest power of the day, King Philip of Spain, and Philip was Catholic, and there was, of course, the danger, therefore, that if Philip actually invaded England, those who were Catholic would rally behind him and behind his candidate for the throne, who was Catholic, Mary, Queen of Scots. And so Catholicism seemed to be unpatriotic and dangerous to many of Elizabeth's counsellors, and it was very difficult for her, therefore, to adopt a policy of religious toleration. Indeed, it takes right up until 1648, the Treaty of Westphalia, in this 150 years really into the religious debates that have come out of the Reformation, before there comes to be a reluctant acceptance that different states are going to maintain different faiths. And indeed, some years beyond that, before individuals within a state are generally accepted as having the right to follow their own religious beliefs.
This is a long way to go.
So toleration is a very long journey in European history. Yeah. And on the way, the debate is very fierce and very, very savage. And it lays the ground for that culture of debate, which I think is what characterizes the West today.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. That's very interesting. So, can I understand the Britain has already had a sense of its identity as a nation state in the 16th century?
Yes, I think I would go along with that. As I think I said before, when Queen Mary wanted to marry, and in fact did marry, the Catholic King of Spain,
Yes.
it was extremely unpopular. And it was unpopular because England did not want to become a colony of Spain.
Okay.
And Elizabeth, when she becomes queen, one of the advantages of not marrying is that there's no danger that England's going to become a colony of whichever country her husband comes from.
So is that one reason she remained a virgin all her reign?
I think that is partly to do with it. I think Elizabeth was very, very careful about marriage, and she deeply resented it when Parliament started encouraging her to marry. That many of the leading Protestants in England in the 1560s wanted Elizabeth to marry because the next in line to the throne was the Catholic Mary Queen of Scots, and therefore their political careers and political future were in danger were Elizabeth to die. And she nearly did die in 1562 of smallpox, which ravaged her face. And so the danger that Elizabeth's death would be succeeded by England turning back again to Catholicism was something that led people to want her very much to marry. But Elizabeth, although she may have contemplated marriage at various times, remained a virgin right to her death.
Yes, yes. Oh, wow. Thank you. That's very interesting. Thank you. And for more stories in the Tudor dynasty about its politics and religion, let's see the videos.